In the heart of the Middle East, beneath vast desert skies and snow-capped mountain ranges, Iran stands at the center of one of the most enduring geopolitical confrontations of the modern era. It is a nation shaped not only by ancient empires and spiritual traditions, but by centrifuges spinning deep underground, by sanctions written in foreign capitals, and by warships patrolling narrow waters where global energy lifelines pass. Decades, Iran's nuclear program has defined its relationship with the outside world. Tehran insists its ambitions are peaceful, designed to secure energy independence and scientific progress. Western governments, led primarily by the United States, have viewed those ambitions with suspicion, fearing that uranium enrichment could cross the threshold from civilian use to weapons capability. Between these competing narratives lies a landscape of mistrust hardened by history. The crisis did not emerge overnight. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution, relations between Iran and Washington collapsed dramatically. Diplomatic ties were severed. Economic sanctions began as targeted measures and evolved into a complex architecture of financial restrictions, oil embargoes, and secondary sanctions affecting companies worldwide. Each new round of penalties tightened economic pressure, isolating Iran from global banking systems and reducing oil revenues that once fueled rapid modernization. Yet pressure has rarely produced surrender. Instead, it has deepened Iran's determination to assert sovereignty. Nuclear facilities were expanded and fortified. Sites such as Natanz and Fordow became symbols of defiance as much as infrastructure. Underground halls, shielded by mountains and reinforced concrete, reflected a strategic doctrine: survival through resilience. The message was unmistakable. External threats would be met with endurance, not retreat. Tensions reached a turning point in 2015 with the signing of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal. Under this agreement, Iran accepted limits on uranium enrichment and intrusive international inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. For a brief period, hope replaced confrontation. Oil exports increased, foreign investors returned cautiously, and diplomatic channels reopened. But geopolitics is rarely stable. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement and reinstated sweeping sanctions, arguing that the deal failed to address ballistic missile development and regional activities. The fragile equilibrium collapsed. Iran gradually reduced its compliance, enriching uranium beyond previous limits. The cycle of escalation resumed, punctuated by covert sabotage, cyber operations, and targeted assassinations that raised fears of open conflict. Across the region, rivalry with Israel intensified. Israeli leaders have repeatedly declared they will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons capability, framing the issue as existential. Meanwhile, Iran's support for allied groups in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen has expanded its strategic reach while amplifying confrontation with regional adversaries. Proxy dynamics blur the line between Cold War and hot conflict, where strikes occur in shadows rather than battlefields formally declared. At sea, The strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz underscores the stakes. Roughly a fifth of the world's traded oil passes through this narrow corridor. Iranian naval exercises and periodic tanker seizures have demonstrated the leverage geography provides. Any disruption sends shockwaves through global markets, reminding distant capitals that Iran's influence extends far beyond its borders. Inside the country, sanctions have reshaped daily life. Inflation has eroded purchasing power. The national currency has weakened dramatically. Young graduates face limited job prospects despite high levels of education. Yet sanctions have also fostered a parallel economy. Informal trade networks, domestic manufacturing initiatives, and strategic partnerships with non-Western powers. Tehran has deepened ties with countries such as China and Russia, seeking alternatives to Western-dominated financial systems. The nuclear issue is therefore not merely about technology, it is about identity and autonomy. For Iranian leaders, mastering the nuclear fuel cycle symbolizes scientific dignity and independence from foreign domination. For critics abroad, it represents a potential destabilization of regional balance. The disagreement reflects deeper historical memory, centuries of foreign intervention, from imperial competition to Cold War maneuvering, have left scars that inform contemporary suspicion. Military calculations hover constantly in the background. Analysts debate breakout time, missile ranges, and defense systems. Air defense batteries guard sensitive facilities. Cyber units wage invisible campaigns. Intelligence agencies monitor every development. Yet despite periodic crises, full-scale war has been avoided, constrained by the catastrophic consequences such conflict would unleash. Diplomacy continues in cycles. Talks resume, stall, and resume again. European intermediaries attempt to bridge divides. Negotiators debate enrichment percentages and verification mechanisms measured in technical precision, yet heavy with political symbolism. Each meeting carries the weight of preventing another spiral toward confrontation. The Iranian public watches these developments with mixed emotions. National pride coexists with economic fatigue. Many citizens desire reintegration with the global economy, greater opportunity, and reduced isolation. Others view resistance as necessary to preserve sovereignty. Within this spectrum lies a society far more complex than headlines suggest. Ultimately, Iran's nuclear standoff reflects a broader question: how does a revolutionary state navigate a global order it distrusts, yet cannot ignore? The answer remains unresolved. The centrifuges continue to spin. Sanctions remain in force. Naval vessels patrol contested waters. Diplomats draft proposals that may reshape or unravel years of tension. Desert night sky, the lights of enrichment facilities glow faintly against the horizon. They are symbols of ambition, anxiety, and strategic calculation. In this shadowed space between deterrence and diplomacy, Iran stands neither fully isolated nor fully integrated, but suspended in a precarious balance that defines its modern era. Before it became the Islamic Republic, the nation now known as Iran stood under the rule of a monarch who sought rapid modernization at breathtaking speed. The reign of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi was marked by grand infrastructure projects, industrial expansion, and close alignment with Western powers, especially the United States. Skylines rose, universities expanded, and oil revenues flowed into ambitious development plans. But beneath the surface of modernization, resentment quietly gathered. The Shah's reforms, known as the White Revolution, aimed to transform society through land redistribution, education initiatives, and expanded rights for women. Yet these rapid changes disrupted traditional structures. Clerics feared the erosion of Islamic values. Merchants in the bazaars felt economically sidelined. Political opposition was suppressed by the intelligence agency SAVAK, whose reputation for surveillance and harsh repression intensified public anger. Modernization without political freedom created a volatile contradiction. In the late 1970s, protests erupted across cities from Qom to Tabriz to Tehran. What began as scattered demonstrations evolved into a nationwide movement uniting religious leaders, students, workers, and secular activists. Although their visions for the future differed, they shared one objective: the removal of the monarchy. At the heart of the revolutionary movement stood Ruhollah Khomeini, a cleric exiled for his outspoken criticism of the Shah. From abroad, his sermons were smuggled into Iran on cassette tapes, spreading a message that fused religion with resistance. As 1979 approached, the monarchy weakened. Strikes paralyzed the oil industry. Mass protests filled the streets with chants demanding independence and justice. In January, the Shah left Iran, officially for medical treatment but effectively in exile. His departure marked the collapse of a dynasty that had ruled for decades. Shortly afterward, Khomeini returned to Tehran to an overwhelming reception, welcomed by millions who saw in him the symbol of a new beginning. The revolution moved swiftly. A national referendum replaced the monarchy with an Islamic republic. The new constitution established a unique political system blending republican institutions with clerical oversight. At its apex stood the supreme leader, a position granting ultimate authority over the military, judiciary, and key state institutions. This fusion of religious legitimacy and political power reshaped Iran's identity domestically and internationally. Soon after, the revolutionary fervor collided with external crisis. In November 1979, students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking American diplomats hostage for 444 days. The hostage crisis cemented hostility between Iran and the United States and entrenched mutual distrust that continues decades later. Sanctions followed, diplomatic ties were severed, and Iran's new leadership framed resistance to Western influence as central to its revolutionary mission. Barely a year later, another challenge emerged. In 1980, neighboring Iraq under Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, igniting a brutal 8-year conflict known as the Iran-Iraq War. The war devastated cities, claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and entrenched a siege mentality within the young republic. National unity hardened under pressure. The Revolutionary Guard, established to protect the revolution, expanded into a powerful military and economic force. The trauma of war reinforced a narrative of survival against foreign aggression. Internally, the revolution also reshaped culture and daily life. Legal codes were revised to align with Islamic principles. Dress codes were introduced. Public morality regulations became part of governance. At the same time, literacy campaigns expanded education, and healthcare networks reached rural regions long neglected under the monarchy. The state sought not merely to govern, but to redefine society's moral foundation. Over the decades, the Islamic Republic has experienced internal tensions between reform and conservatism. Some leaders have pushed for greater engagement with the international community and social flexibility. Others have emphasized ideological purity and resistance. These debates surface in elections, public discourse, and periodic protests, yet the overarching structure of clerical authority has endured. The revolution, therefore, cannot be reduced to a single moment. It is an ongoing process, shaping policies, alliances, and identity. Iran's regional posture, its nuclear ambitions, and its defiance of external pressure all trace roots back to 1979. The memory of overthrowing a powerful monarchy sustains a belief that sovereignty must be guarded at all costs. Today, the legacy of revolutionary fire still burns. It influences how leaders negotiate abroad and how citizens interpret hardship at home. It explains why compromise is often framed as vulnerability and why endurance is elevated as virtue. To understand modern Iran is to understand this revolution not only as a political upheaval, but as a transformation of worldview that continues to define the nation's path through a turbulent world. Long before it was called Iran, this land was known to the world as Persia, a civilization born on vast plateaus between mountains and deserts. It emerged not as a peripheral kingdom, but as one of the greatest empires in human history. Its memory is not distant folklore. It is a living foundation beneath modern identity, quietly shaping national pride and political consciousness. In the 6th century BCE, Cyrus the Great forged the Achaemenid Empire from scattered tribes into a vast imperial power. Stretched from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean Sea, it became the largest empire the world had yet seen. But Persia's greatness was not defined solely by conquest. It was defined by governance. Cyrus introduced policies of relative tolerance, allowing subject peoples to maintain their customs, religions, and local autonomy. This administrative innovation distinguished Persia from many of its rivals. Under Darius I, the empire refined its structure. Road systems connected distant provinces. A standardized taxation system funded monumental architecture. The Royal Road enabled communication across thousands of kilometers, creating an early form of centralized coordination. The imperial capital at Persepolis stood as a symbol of grandeur, columns rising like stone forests. reliefs carved with delegations from across the known world offering tribute. Yet power invited confrontation. The Greco-Persian Wars brought Persia into direct conflict with Greek city-states. Battles such as Marathon and Salamis entered Western historical memory as turning points, but from Persia's perspective, they were episodes within a broader imperial narrative. The empire endured for over 2 centuries before falling to Alexander the Great in 330 BCE. His conquest burned Persepolis, but it could not erase Persian identity. After Alexander's death, successor states ruled briefly before indigenous dynasties re-emerged. The Parthians and later the Sassanids restored Persian sovereignty. The Sassanid Empire became Rome's formidable eastern rival for centuries, competing militarily and culturally. Religion also evolved. Zoroastrianism flourished as a state faith long before Islam would transform the region. These layers of history embedded resilience into Persian consciousness, the idea that even after conquest, civilization could revive. The 7th century Arab conquest introduced Islam, reshaping language, culture, and political order. Yet Persian heritage did not dissolve. Instead, it merged with Islamic civilization, contributing poetry, science, architecture, and philosophy that would influence the broader Muslim world. The Persian language evolved into Farsi, but retained echoes of ancient roots. Poets like Ferdowsi preserved pre-Islamic legends in the Shahnameh, ensuring that kings and heroes of old would not vanish from collective memory. Centuries later, dynasties such as the Safavids reasserted centralized Persian rule. The Safavid era institutionalized Shia Islam as the state religion, a defining characteristic that distinguishes modern Iran from many of its Sunni-majority neighbors. This religious orientation would later become a pillar of national differentiation and political identity. In the early 20th century, the country officially adopted the name Iran in international diplomacy, reflecting an indigenous term meaning land of the Aryans. Yet the world continues to use Persia when referring to its classical heritage. This dual naming mirrors a dual consciousness, modern state and ancient civilization intertwined. Archaeological ruins still rise from the desert as silent witnesses. Stone staircases at Persepolis remain etched with the faces of emissaries from distant lands. The tomb of Cyrus stands alone in the plains of Pasargadae, its simplicity contrasting with the immensity of his legacy. These sites are not merely tourist destinations, they are symbols of continuity. For many Iranians, ancient Persia represents a golden age of sovereignty and cultural brilliance. It provides historical depth to contemporary resilience. When modern leaders speak of dignity and independence, echoes of imperial memory resonate beneath the rhetoric. The narrative suggests that Iran is not simply a nation-state navigating present tensions, but the heir to millennia of statecraft and endurance. This civilizational memory complicates external perceptions. Foreign observers often focus on current politics, regional conflicts, or nuclear negotiations. But within Iran, the past stretches far beyond 1979 or even Islam. It reaches back to Cyrus, Darius, and empires that once shaped continents. That long horizon fosters a strategic patience, a belief that history moves in cycles and that decline can be followed by renewal. To understand Iran today requires looking beyond headlines into these ancient foundations. The empire may have fallen centuries ago, but its psychological architecture remains. Into modern debates about sovereignty, sanctions, and identity flows the quiet current of Persia, an inheritance of glory, trauma, and unbroken cultural continuity that still defines the nation's sense of itself in a turbulent world. Beyond geopolitics and ancient empires, the true pulse of Iran beats in its cities. In crowded metro stations, in university lecture halls, and in the endless traffic of Tehran, a young generation negotiates the weight of history and the urgency of the present. More than half of the population is under 40. They were born long after the 1979 revolution and the Iran-Iraq War, but they live with the consequences of both. Tehran stretches from the foothills of the Alborz Mountains down into dense urban grids where luxury apartments stand beside aging concrete blocks. Billboards alternate between religious imagery and consumer advertising. Cafes buzz with quiet conversations about art and technology and opportunity. The internet, despite restrictions, connects Iranian youth to global culture, music, fashion, political debate. They are not isolated from the world, they are entangled with it. Opportunity feels constrained. Economic sanctions have fueled inflation and reduced purchasing power. Graduates leave universities with engineering, medical, and business degrees only to confront a narrow job market. Many seek futures abroad, joining a diaspora that spans Europe, North America, and Australia. This migration represents both ambition and loss, a silent referendum on domestic limitations. Women stand at the center of social tension. Iranian women are among the most educated in the region, occupying seats in universities at high rates. They work as doctors, engineers, artists, and entrepreneurs. At the same time, legal frameworks and dress regulations define visible boundaries of public behavior. The compulsory hijab has become not merely a garment, but a symbol, interpreted by authorities as cultural integrity and by critics as state control. Periodic protests reveal the depth of frustration. When demonstrations erupt, they are not always unified in ideology. Some demand economic reform, others call for expanded civil liberties. Many are driven by immediate grievances: fuel prices, corruption, police enforcement. The streets become arenas of expression where slogans echo against government buildings and security forces respond with firm containment. The cycle of protest and restriction has become a recurring feature of contemporary life. Social media amplifies every moment. Images circulate rapidly, transforming local incidents into national conversations. The state attempts to regulate digital space through filtering and surveillance, but technology adapts constantly. Virtual private networks and encrypted messaging create alternative channels of communication. The contest between control and expression unfolds not only on asphalt but in cyberspace. Despite tension, ordinary life continues. Families gather for Nowruz celebrations, marking the Persian New Year. Parks fill with picnics and laughter during spring holidays. Poetry readings and underground music scenes thrive quietly. Artists navigate censorship with metaphor and symbolism, continuing a long tradition of layered expression dating back centuries. Resilience is woven into cultural habit. Religion remains influential, but its interpretation varies widely. Some citizens embrace strict adherence, others practice privately while advocating social flexibility. Mosques coexist with modern shopping malls. The spectrum of belief reflects a society more nuanced than external portrayals suggest. Economic disparities sharpen frustration. Wealthier districts of northern Tehran showcase imported cars and upscale boutiques, while southern neighborhoods struggle with unemployment and rising costs. This divide fuels perceptions of inequality and questions about distribution of opportunity. In rural provinces, water shortages and environmental degradation intensify hardship, linking ecological stress to social pressure. The state balances reform and rigidity. Elections occur, but candidate vetting limits ideological diversity. Some administrations promise engagement with the world and domestic moderation, only to face structural constraints from entrenched institutions. This internal push and pull shapes policy shifts without fundamentally altering the system's architecture. For young Iranians, the future feels uncertain yet not hopeless. They innovate within limits. Startups emerge in technology and design sectors despite sanctions. Creative industries adapt to restrictions with coded storytelling. The desire for dignity, employment, and personal autonomy persists even when pathways appear narrow. To understand Iran is to understand its geography. This is not a small nation shaped by a single river or coastline. It is a vast plateau ringed by mountains, cut by deserts, and anchored to one of the most strategic waterways on Earth. Its terrain has protected it, isolated it, and empowered it all at once. The backbone of northern Iran rises in the Alborz Mountains, a dramatic wall separating the Caspian Sea from the central plateau. High peaks such as Mount Damavand dominate the horizon, snow-covered and volcanic in origin. These mountains are not merely scenic, they form natural fortifications. Historically, invading armies found passage difficult. Climate varies sharply across short distances. Lush forests in the north, arid expanses beyond the ridgelines. Geography fragments space and concentrates settlement. To the west, the Zagros Mountains stretch in long, parallel ridges toward Iraq. This rugged terrain has shaped tribal cultures and slowed military campaigns for centuries. During the Iran-Iraq War, the mountains became defensive barriers absorbing waves of attack. The land itself functioned as ally. The same ridges now host vital infrastructure and energy routes hidden within valleys carved by time. At the heart of the country lies the Iranian plateau, dominated by deserts such as Dasht-e and Dasht-e-Lut. These are landscapes of salt flats and shifting sand where summer temperatures can reach extreme highs. Settlement here has always required adaptation. Qanat irrigation systems, towns clustered around limited water sources, and architecture designed to deflect heat. The harshness of this interior has reinforced a historical instinct towards self-reliance and careful resource management. But it is along the southern edge that geography becomes global power. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical choke points. Approximately a fifth of globally traded oil passes through this narrow corridor connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. At its narrowest, the distance between Iran and Oman is only a few dozen kilometers. This proximity grants Tehran strategic leverage disproportionate to its coastline length. Naval vessels patrol these waters constantly. The presence of the United States Fifth Fleet and regional militaries underscores the strait's significance. Every tanker that passes represents economic lifelines not only for Gulf states but for global markets. When tensions rise, insurance premiums spike and oil prices react instantly. Geography translates directly into geopolitical influence. Iran's islands in the Gulf extend that reach. Military installations and missile systems positioned along the coast provide layered defense capability. The terrain allows asymmetric strategy, fast patrol boats, mines, and anti-ship missiles integrated into a doctrine of deterrence. Iran does not require a blue water navy to exert pressure. It relies on proximity and preparedness. To the north, the Caspian Sea opens different possibilities. Energy reserves beneath its waters tie Iran into complex negotiations with neighboring states. Rail corridors connect northward towards Central Asia and Russia, while eastward routes link to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Iran sits at a crossroads of trade corridors that echo ancient Silk Road pathways. Infrastructure projects seek to revive that historic connectivity, positioning the country as a transit hub between Asia and Europe. Yet geography also imposes constraints. Water scarcity challenges agriculture. Climate change intensifies drought cycles. Population growth concentrates in urban centers, straining limited supplies. Environmental stress increasingly intersects with political stability. As rivers shrink and lakes recede, ecological vulnerability becomes a national security concern. The terrain has shaped not only defense strategy, but cultural identity. Mountains symbolize endurance, deserts symbolize purification and hardship. Sea lanes symbolize connection and confrontation. Iran's physical environment reinforces narratives of resilience against external threat and survival through adaptation. Throughout history, empires have attempted to control this plateau, from Alexander to Arab caliphates to Mongol invaders. Yet the land absorbed and transformed each wave. The combination of natural barriers and strategic corridors created a paradox, hard to conquer, impossible to ignore. That paradox persists today. In modern calculations of power, maps matter as much as ideology. Satellite images track facilities nestled against mountainsides. Naval charts trace shipping lanes through Hormuz. Energy analysts monitor pipelines crossing ridges and plains. Every contour line carries implication. As sunlight fades over the Persian Gulf and cargo ships move silently toward open sea, the reality becomes clear. Iran's geography is not passive backdrop. It is active force. It shields, connects, and pressures. It limits expansion while enabling influence. It ensures that whatever political system governs Tehran, the land itself will remain central to global strategy. Mountains stand immovable, deserts stretch unforgiving, sea lanes pulse with commerce. In this convergence of extremes, Iran's power is etched into the landscape, an enduring reminder that geography does not change quickly, and that nations built upon such terrain rarely fade quietly from history.